This is starting to sound quite complicated, right? So, and I love all this data stuff, but this is starting to sound quite complicated. And I suppose it's going to require quite a lot of effort, maybe some tech, maybe some clever people. How do you go about convincing senior people this is worth doing, getting their buy-in to actually go down this? What's going to be the benefit for the business? And I suppose, how do you go about getting their buy-in? So I suppose, should we start, Alex? I suppose you've probably got experience with this from a sort of pure marketing side. How would you go about convincing people this is a good idea?
I'd sort of first start with just telling them they've been lied to. And this is part of the problem. Like everyone looked at digital as, as the savior, which it is, and it's like, the dominant channel, and particularly as everyone moves towards D2C models. That's absolutely right. But before, there were the numbers that were coming through, and they're being reported back up, and they were just numbers. No one knew, because the percentages were like these weird small numbers, but they added up to big revenue, and everyone just, you went to the finance director and said, like, look, this is working. Should we do more of it? Yes. So I think the problem is all the channels claimed all the sales, and so we've had quite a long time now of people not reporting in the right way or reporting accurately, or leadership understanding actually what attribution really means. And I think they start to get their heads around it when people looked at the value of stores, and they're like, oh, well, it's a problem with attribute, but they still didn't really understand the complexity of the sort of dark arts of digital marketing. So first of all, I think you have to explain to people that actually some of the things that we're looking at for aren't correct, and it's a very simplistic view, and have the same debate that we're having now. And I think attribution is a journey, right? Lots of people might be at last click, and that is a way of measuring it. And then you can go on a journey. You can look at, first interaction, take out direct traffic, which is a bit better than last click. You can look at it linearly and then sort of add in all the touch points and attribute, give equal sort of value to each of those. So there are various different steps you can go that can become closer to a version of the truth. Never perfect, but closer to that version of the truth. And then you get to the point where you go, okay, well, my business is slightly more complex and the channels are more complex, so I might need to build something that is a custom build, and you might be able to do some of that yourself just by looking at the channels and saying, well, we're a bit more awareness focused, so we have a longer sales funnel, so we're going to put more value on that first touch, a little bit less on this, and so you can sort of make some assumptions, which is good. Like it's a journey of getting better, and then you can go to the point, okay, well, we're going to
and in your experience, I suppose there's two things here. If you've been the guy saying, "This is give me more money, I'm going to get you more sales," and you've been the one advocating I suppose the addiction to the Google PPC and Google Shopping drug. If you've been advocating that for the past few years, and now you're saying, "Well, actually, we need to wean ourselves off this, and we need to sort of change our lifestyle and get a healthier mix." I suppose there's a credibility thing potentially there. So you might almost have to go back and say, well, "Actually, we've been getting wrong."
Sorry, I was just going to say, like, on that point, right, I think sometimes it can be really effective to go after the finance director or your finance person, because ultimately they're usually the most cynical. They're usually the one that's signing off all the cash, and they're usually seeing this huge amount go out, and they get a report back every month that says all my marketing channels combined drove 10 million, yet I've only got 7 million in the bank. What's going on here, right? So there tends to be frustrations there because they hate to see money being spent sometimes. And I think so going after them on two fronts. One is that ultimately they'll unlock the investments, usually, and then second part is that there's usually a kind of a frustration that's bubbling there because of a lack of understanding. And if you can kind of get a senior stakeholder like that on your side, they tend to have a lot of voice and kind of be almost make them the person who's kind of involved with getting this and getting the win on their side. Because the most important thing with this is that attribution is a zero-sum game. You're just moving around different conversions within the total, as opposed to attributing at a channel level, which is what Tom exactly pointed out earlier. So that'll probably be my advice, is go after the kind of, just put your hands up and say, we want to do this as honestly and as truthfully as possible. There's multiple ways we can do this, and these are the implications of moving towards this model versus this model versus this model, and this is how they reconcile back with our numbers we see at a financial level, and this is what we want to trial with it.
But almost going through an education, or almost like we're doing a discussion and letting them almost find the answer themselves and go, well, actually, should we do it this way or should we do it that way? And
and that's what an FD does, right? So they're highly numerate people, and they like constantly looking at business models and whether it is business plans and how quickly those things are going to return. So you can play the numbers game with that person, and they're also really difficult to bullshit if they're any good, and most of them are. That's why they got to the job in the first place. So, and I've had the conversation with CEOs and an FTs like, I don't believe it. I think we're just spending money here. Can't we just turn it off and see what happens? And they're like, well, that is definitely one way of doing it, and we'll that is a way of doing it, but there's a risk with it. The next way to do it is, okay, well, let's do a proper incrementality test, and we'll take a region and we'll split it out and we'll do it in a safe way. Incrementality testing for the sake of like running something for 3 weeks and reviewing it is a great way of getting those people on board and saying, well, because agencies can sometimes say keep spending, and you're not really looking at the plateau and the effect on it, or not. And sometimes the answer is spend less, particularly maybe branded search. Like there are times when you might need to not have to spend as much for traffic that's coming out.
Tom, I know you've had more than your fair share of awkward conversations with clients over time about spending all their money. I suppose, how do you deal with these conversations with senior stakeholders so that, because I suppose the challenge sometimes could be is people go, right, well, we've tried it for a few weeks, we just want to do something else now, go back to what was working before.
Yeah, I think there is an element of helping people understand and helping senior stakeholders understand. There's also an element of fear or trepidation towards changing something that works. If you're getting big numbers through every month that say digital's doing well, and then somebody comes to you and says, right, we want to change how we track all of digital, and we'll have to do all this new tracking, and it all have to go into one area, and it's a big sweeping change. They're going to be like, but what we do works. So I think there has to be an element of demonstration as well, and it's something we've done with clients. And so you can never 100% say this is everything that's going to happen when we change attribution model, but there is an element of, okay, let's pick out 3 attribution models that might work for you. This is some of the changes we've made on this attribution model. We'll put more money into Facebook, for example. On this attribution model, we'd be putting more money into affiliates. And this is how we'd be moving your money around, and this is how we'd expect the revenue to change between channels. And it helps alleviate that they're not blindly jumping into like, oh, my data's disappearing kind of fear.
I think that's a great point. I think like obviously Tom is most practically applying this stuff. I think what happens sometimes, it becomes a theoretical sort of conversation as to the ideas of attribution, whereas you can actually root them very cleanly in the practical, and sometimes what can happen is you kind of get tempted and you might walk away and go, okay, well, we're last click now, I want to move to a data-driven, machine learning model. And I would kind of warn against that somewhat, is that if you want to bring people with you, sometimes actually moving from, I tend to go first click first. So I move from last click to first click, because it just completely shifts the it's wrong, but it's less wrong, like you said earlier, John.
It's easy to understand as well, right? You can get it.
Exactly, very simple conceptually to go, okay, well, now we were there, now we're here, and these are the decisions we're going to make because we've changed that. It's rewarding Facebook acquisition, which is 80% new customers, whereas before we had that budget being invested in affiliates, which was 80% existing customers. And you can kind of see practically what it is, because all you're trying to do is create a kind of something to help you make better decisions on where to invest and where to understand your values coming from. So that would be kind of my kind of advice would be to move, if you are a last click and you want to change attribution, change it kind of almost conceptually quite easily to a weighted model or something that's a bit more simple, and then move towards data driven when you kind of earn the right to take the kind of company that far, because you're getting towards marginal gains at that point. When you can start moving into those sort of areas, when you move from last click to first click, it's quite a severe, clean break that changes it.
You said it better than I did, Cormac. Like, it's a journey. Like, I totally agree, and you've articulated it much clearer than I did. But like, you don't have to be perfect from the start. You can be better, and then better again, and then, so